I have the honor of introducing our first keynote of CIDOC 2024. David Newbury is the very recent Senior Director of Public Technologies at Getty, where he works with cultural heritage professionals, researchers, scientists, and technologists who find common solutions to technical and scholarly problems. In this capacity, he is responsible for developing, evangelizing, and executing Getty's digital strategy for public and collection technology. David was also the past president of MCN, and he's on the executive board for the IIIF Consortium. The past few days, he and his team attended the Hackalot here in Amsterdam, a 24-hour-long hackathon with linked open data, and it was a joy to see them work. And David is going to talk about the work of digital collections. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure. I'm David Newbury. I'm coming from the Getty in Los Angeles, and it's lovely to see you all. I want to start by thanking Chils and Saskia, ICOM, and the Rijksmuseum. It's a huge pleasure to be here. It's lovely to see so many people I know and so many people I'm looking forward to getting to know. As Saskia said, my job is to lead the Public Technologies Department for the Getty Museum. And I've been working on museum data standards for the past decade. The people in this room, you are my people. You are people who I care about. We do the same work. And it's a huge privilege to be here and to be able to talk to you about what we can do together at this conference and in the work that we do. I'd like to open this and like to show you 3 objects from the collections at the Getty. I want to start with this. This is a beautiful page from the Getty Epistles. It's lovely, it's illustrated, illuminated, beautiful scenes of nature in gold leaf. This is the first object I'd like to show you. This is the second object I'd like to show you. This is from a photographic album in the collections of our archives. This is from G. Pratt, who is a French silk inspector who in the late 1800s was working in China. And this is his journal in which he documented his travels, the sales that he was doing, the work that he was doing, which he illustrated with photographs within it. And I'd like to show you this. This is a book from our library. It's called The Moral of Flowers by Rebecca Hay. She was a British author. It's a book of poetry illustrated with beautiful photos of flowers that go through and are part throughout the whole book. What do you see when you see these 3 things? Do you see 3 pages from books? 3 manuscript pages. Is that the right way to think about these 3 things together? Or do you see them as 3 different artworks? 3 ways in which we represent the world, 3 pieces of art together. Instead, are these 3 documents that are authored. Each one of these is a book full of text, full of words, full of ways that we communicate out to each other. Or do you see these as collection items? These are 3 objects in our collections, things that we have a duty of care for, things that we preserve, things that we take care of in the museum, in the library, in the archive, at the Getty. You see these as human-made objects. Are these entities that exist in a network of information connected across collections? Do you see these as primary sources, ways in which we do research, ways that we bring knowledge together? Do you see these as stories about nature? We have here flowers. We have here people. We have people in nature. Is this a way in which we're understanding the natural world that we all live in? Do you see these as beauty? These are wonderful pictures. These are wonderful art. They're aesthetically pleasing. They're fun to look at. Maybe you're a nerd like me and you see these as 3 JPEGs. But I'd like to show you something else that's equally interesting and equally part of the work that we do. These are the 3 web pages on our website for these 3 objects. I'd like to point out that they are completely different. 3 pictures of 3 artworks from 3 books. We have here a museum collection. We have here an archival finding aid. We have here a library catalog record. These are standards that we know, DAX, MARC, linked art. These are cataloging standards. These are models of the world. These are ways in which we understand how we take these beautiful works that we have in our collections and represent them in our computer systems. The web pages that we build, they display the model that we have chosen to catalog these objects back out into the world. They're how we tell our story to the users that we have. And I want you to know the models that we have are utterly terrible. But that's not our fault. All models of the world are terrible. Every way in which we choose to represent the world does inconceivable violence to that underlying reality and the humanistic truth of our lived experience. There is no way to take the way of being human and stick it down into a JSON file. There's no way to take the work of art and convert it into a MARC record. That is not the way the world works. It's unfair. It's not true. And so why do we dare to do this? Why do we choose to take these beautiful works of art and turn them into thin, meaningless models that are not there? And we do it not because we think it's really fun to go and, crush reality down into a little box, but we do it because we care about the people who want to use the works that we have in our collection. And the way in which we understand what our users want, what the people who work with our collections want, is through the disciplinary training that we all have as librarians, as museologists, as archivists, as technologists. The way we understand the best way to help our users is through that disciplinary training that we all have in our own ways, in our own disciplines. Those disciplines describe the work that we do, the way in which we execute, the way in which we catalog, the way in which we build a model of the world inside our heads to reflect out the work that we believe our users want to do with these materials. That's the work of collection documentation. That's the work of museums. That's the work of librarians and archivists, people who work with collections. And so I want to tell you 3 disciplinary stories. This is from the Getty's art collection, and a work of art. It's done in paint, it's done in gold, created by a French artist in the early 16th century. And when we document it, what we're documenting is its materiality, how it's been exhibited, what we know about its history and its influence, how this incredible object has traveled through space and time. And that model comes out of a model of inventory management. Museums think of their work to track the location, the movement, the insurance value of these expensive, unique objects. Where is it stored? How much light has it received? How has it been exhibited? What is its provenance? What's its insurance value? And the model and our understanding of our users is around the study and the inspiration and the duty of care for unique physical objects. As museum professionals, that's how we think about our objects. That's what we are doing. This is an archival document. It's a primary source. It's documenting the travels and opinions of that French silk inspector working in China in the late 19th century. And our model, the model of an archive, documents context and history, the processing of this page. How did this document come to us? How is it part of a larger context of a culture? And how is it arranged physically and intellectually within that model? And that model emerges from finding aids, that understanding of how do we catalog vast, vast sources of primary material to enable scholars to understand what is in that archive. How would I get access to that? Is it worth flying to Los Angeles to see this object in the archive or not? Can it help me do that research? And so it enables us to understand the context of the archive's creator and to retrieve those physical objects. That is how archivists think about their work. Third, this is a book of poetry written by Rebecca Hay, published by Longman, Rees, Orme, Brown, Green, and Longman in 1833. It's an English book. It was published in 1833. It's part of the library catalog. And the model here is documenting authorship, publication, subject matter, location, and the access criteria for the book. It's coming out of a model of card catalogs, of allowing self-service to huge numbers of books in a volume, in a consistent way to understand how to find things on a shelf, to gain access to them, to do the work of scholarship and research. If we facilitate that identification, the confirmation that the book is relevant to the subject that you're studying, and to get to the book so that you can hold it to research, for scholarship, for pleasure, maybe because you want to look at beautiful pictures. And I will say, none of these are wrong models. They are all useful models. They're all incorrect, of course, because none of them is fully documenting everything that we could possibly know about these. But they're documenting things that help people do the work of using collections and the work that we do of caring for collections. But they're still wrong, because I would like to say, despite my deep respect for librarians, archivists, museum colleagues, these are all books, right? We don't need we have three different perspectives, three entirely different modalities of talking about these works. But under the hood, we're talking about 3 books. But actually, we're not even really talking about 3 books, right? We're talking about 3 digitized records that exist in a computer system available on the internet as a set of images. I will say I have never seen any of these books in person. I have only experienced them through the websites that we generate here. These are web pages that describe items, provide access, and enable research for people across the world who cannot come to Los Angeles, who don't get to hold the manuscripts, who can't request books from our library. And they're all embedded in that discovery ecosystem, that way in which we connect the work together, the way in which we find these materials as part of that global network of information that we are all here in this room committed to building together. And this is the way that everyone discovers the information that we have in our ecosystems. You may or may not know about this. This is the search box out of Google. And one of the things that is shocking for me is Google is only 26 years old. I'd like you to realize that DAX is also only about 20 years old. Mark is about 30. Linked art is about 5. These are all contemporaries of each other. The work that we do as in libraries have been happening for hundreds of years. Archives are the same, museums the same. The internet is incredibly new, but the internet has transformed the way society works incredibly fast. One of the things we say at the Getty all the time is that there are no art history emergencies, that things can take the time they take because the artwork isn't getting any younger, and it can happen at the pace of scholarship. But we also work on the internet, and the internet moves incredibly fast. I will say, what you see here is a hard drive for one of your computers. This thing, which is only about this big, can hold all of the collection records from our archives, from our library, and our museum on a thing that you could hide in the pocket of my pants. We can store information in incredible ways, and that's changed over the past 26 years. And not only has the ability to store information, but the tools that we use to capture information, to process that information, are evolving at that same pace. This is an iPhone. You're all probably familiar with this. But I want you to think really critically about how this thing, which I have on the podium, many of you have in your pocket, what it is capable of. And to do that, I want to tell you a story about what I did this weekend. So this weekend, I took a walk in Westerpark in Amsterdam. It's a beautiful park. If any of you have not been there, has lovely walking paths. It's a wonderful place. And as I was walking, in the middle of it, there is a community garden. There's a beautiful sign on a gate. The gate was locked. I wanted to get in, and I was curious what the sign said. And so I took a photo of the sign with my iPhone. And then I selected the text in the photo of it directly from my iPhone interface. And then I translated the text on the sign into English from the camera on my phone. And there's a garden party coming up. This is the future of access to information. And it's not really the future of access to information. This is our present of access to information. I mean, I don't think anymore about doing this. This is just the way in which I can work within the world, the way in which I can experience what we are doing. And think about what we've captured here. We have a photo, but it's not just a photo, right? And I will say this is a 48 megapixel photo. I think even 10 years ago when I started a museum, a 48 megapixel photo was a high bar that we thought was wonderful for documenting professionally cultural information. It's now something that I take snapshots of my children with. This photo captures technical metadata. We have the lens, we have the f-stop, we have the resolution. There's all of this information, the ISO. So this captures technical metadata as part of its documentation. It has geospatial metadata. You can see not only did I take a photo of a tree, but I took it in the park. I can look it up on a map. I can see directly where this photo was taken. It also uses AI in my phone to capture horticultural information. This is a white willow. I didn't know that. I'm not even sure I know what a white willow is, but my phone can look at the photo that I took, analyze the plants that are in that, and then provide me links to contextual information about that plant. Again, all I did was take a picture. I will also say this is providing on-device OCR and translation. My phone can do face detection. My phone can do entity recognition. If I want to see all the photos of my daughter, I can ask my phone to show me those. If I want to see all the photos of cats that I've taken, my phone can show me that. I can keyword tag. I can date filter. And this information is synced across my phone and my laptop and the internet and my wife's phone and my wife's computer, and I can share it with anyone, anywhere in the world by clicking a button. We know all of this, right? This is what we do on a daily basis as people who live in a technologically enabled world with the devices that we have. How do we, as museum data professionals, deal with this kind of expectation? This is what our public is trained on. This is the job that they believe that they are doing, not because the disciplinarities that we come out of have trained them to do this. This is what the day-to-day life that they do assumes about the kind of information access that they can get on a daily basis. How do we need to respond in our disciplines to this desire for information beyond what we could possibly catalog? And how do we deal with the fact that in every photo, there's a universe of data far beyond what any of us could display, which we can use to retrieve? How do we manage information overload? Because for so many years, the work of museum documentation has been trying to take things that are hidden, things that have no information, and give them just the smallest amounts of context. And we're beginning to enter in the world where every photo that we take, every record we create, is part of a huge amount of information, more than anybody can handle. I tell this story often in the work that we do. So we have books in our library. We've scanned these books. We haven't done it, but we could run OCR. We could use named entity recognition. I could take the Getty library and find every mention of Van Gogh. Nobody wants to know that we have 8,000 books in our collection that mention the words Van Gogh. That's not a useful way for people to do scholarship. What they want are, what are the 10 books that are most relevant for the question that I'm answering? What do we do? And so now I will once again talk about these objects, but I want to tell you stories about how we struggle with this kind of information overload. So again, this is a beautifully captured photo. The photo you're seeing is not actually a photo, it's actually a digital composite. Our photography team photographed the pigment with one pass and used a different lighting setup, a different camera setup to capture the gold because it's reflective and it shows up differently. We have a team of imaging professionals who synthesize those together to represent this object not as the camera sees it, but as you might see it in the best possible environment. But I will say, Of this entire manuscript, the Getty has 5 pages online. They are these 5 pages. They are the pages that are illuminated. They're beautiful works of art. But the book has many other pages that are not available. We do have them all on microfilm. They were scanned 25 years ago, put on microfilm. But what is our responsibility here? Do we need to show that microfilm out into the world? Do we pollute our collection page by putting very low quality black and white microfilm pages in there? Is there any value? Again, this is the epistle, right? This is the most published book in the world. Is there any value at all in letting people read the Gospel of the epistle to the Ephesians on our website? There are many copies of that people probably have seen before. This book, this is a unique historical record, something special in our collections that we've seen before. But it's documented within a finding aid. This is not the entire finding aid. This is about as much of the finding aid as I could reasonably put on a slide. We have perhaps over-documented this particular archival collection. But from the finding aid, this is the record for the winter costume in 1896, which is the image we've been showing. You can't see the image next to the record for it. There is an option to request from the library catalog. And from there, you can get to the record for the digital item, which has a little link down at the bottom to access digital files, which can link into our DAM system, where you can navigate the sidebar and go to page 109 and see this image again. It's possible, but it's not easy. How do we prioritize that work? How do we say, what should we do? This is what we call the sculpture. This is a finding aid. We have this technology that comes out of the best care of duty, the best disciplinarity, done by incredible professionals over years. But this is a 6,000-page finding aid for a single archive. I can tell you nobody is flipping through this to see whether or not the box on page 1752 contains research material that is valuable for them. But every one of these refers to a physical object that is potentially of interest to us or to a scholar. What do we need to do to handle this immense volume of material that we can all have to give access out to the world, to meet those users where they are? And finally, this is from a book of poetry and art and botany. We have fully digitized this book. It's on the internet. It's available worldwide. But it's actually not available on the Getty's website. We have scanned it. We submitted it to the Internet Archive. But we did not keep a copy of the files of these because there was a decision was made over a decade ago to let the burden of those files be held by the Internet Archive because that's where people could access the material most regularly. And it works. It's a lovely interface. It has OCR. It gets use, right? But what's our duty of preservation? Is that appropriate care of our collections? Is that doing the work of our discipline here? We have 66,000 books on the Internet Archive scanned out of the Getty. That's something like 10 million pages of book. Do we pull it back? Do we store it on our own servers? Do we preserve it? Do we build an interface that duplicates the Internet Archive to provide this access back out into the world? Is that the right thing for us to be doing? And I don't tell these tales to shame my team, or to shame the Getty, or to shame any of us, but to highlight the challenge, the opportunity that we all have, right? Because the problem that we have here is not a problem of care. It's not a problem of desire to do this work. It's not a problem of trying to figure out what we should be doing with this kind of work. The question for me is, do we retreat into our own disciplinarity? Do we go back and say, the only way in which we can solve these problems is to double down on the work of being a museum person, to say, our history, our tradition teaches us how best to do this work? Do we despair? Do we say, this is utterly impossible, we are not equipped, we cannot handle the work of doing this kind of thing? The world is too vast, our collections are too large. Let us keep on doing what we've always done because we can't meet the world where it needs to be today. Do we double down on standards and processes and technology? Do we build out new models of the world in increasingly complex detail, try to meet everyone where it is? And I will say, as Saskia said, I work on link art, I work on IIIF. These are things that I care deeply about. But is that the solution to the problems that we are facing? Or do we just try and do it all? Do we say, we will work harder, we will push ourselves, we'll do more every day to try to meet these needs? Because the constraint that we have as a field is not the expertise that we have. Everyone in this room is an expert. Everyone here knows what they are doing. The constraint is the value of our time. We are humans, and the most valuable thing that we have to offer is not our disciplinarity, but the judgment that we have as humans, our ability to make good choices, to share out to the world, to decide what is incredibly valuable, and how do we leverage the incredible expertise, the incredible knowledge, the judgment that you all have to do this kind of work. Our disciplines prioritize that labor to help us take advantage of that judgment. The most useful thing we can be doing is not to do mechanical tasks. If we can automate it, we should automate it, because automating frees us to be human, to share our humanity out into the world. But our disciplines also misalign our efforts to collaborate, because across all of these disciplines, there are techniques, there are ways of seeing the world that can react back to this onslaught of information, that can react back to the work that we're all trying to do, and to start building the bridges between these materials. And so, as we all work together, as we share the work of building out this documentation, we share the work out of doing the work of standards, building out the practices, working together to document cultural heritage. In a world where those expectations of what access to knowledge means, where people are not going to card catalogs anymore, they're going on the internet, where people aren't going to the archive directly, they're using the online finding aid, in which most of the works of our museums are most accessible on our websites, and where most of the access to our websites is through Google. How do we consider what our labor, how do we shift where our labor lies to support the values that we need to serve together to support ourselves, to support this community and the larger community of our practice, and really to support that global community that we're all serving? Because that's part of the opportunity we have here, is that, the Rijksmuseum is not only serving the Netherlands, it's serving the world. The Getty is not only serving Los Angeles, it's serving the world. Everyone in this room works for an organization that is helping provide access to information to everyone across the world. And if we do that, I think the thing we need to be thinking about, and the thing that I want this conference to be talking about, when we are talking about standards, when we're talking about museum documentation, when we're talking about those things that we all get very passionate and nerdy about, is to really think about what are those underlying values that we share across disciplines, across organizations, across countries, that we can use to bring us together, that we can use to help prioritize the work that we do to make it valuable. How do we rethink what it means to be part of a discipline? Not from the practices that we share, but from the values that we espouse to give back into the world. And having worked, again, I'm a technologist, right? I have no library training, I have no museum training, I have no archival training. My training is in either film production, which is utterly useless in this context. No one's asked me to light something in 16mm in a very long time, or as a computer programmer. But what that means is that I have this lens, and I talk to people across the disciplines, and I hear the same things, the same values espoused across all the disciplines. I hear a value in story. I hear a value in humanity. I hear a value in art. And using those stories and those documents and that art to explain the world that we live in and to explain ourselves to each other. The work that we do is about communicating humanity to humanity through the work that humanity creates. That's a shared value we all share across disciplines, across organizations. How does our practice support that work going forward? I think we value making connections, the connections that happen across cultures, the connections that happen across histories. The connections come from the documents that we share. They come from the stories inside them. They come from the metadata that's captured in the work that we do in our cataloging. Making those connections, surfacing them out, helping people discover stories they didn't know, builds that work, builds the connections, shows the similarities that we all have and our cultures have across, and highlights differences so we can better understand each other. That's a value that we share across museums and libraries and archives. How does our practice support that work going forward? And finally, how do we celebrate human creativity? How do we celebrate that search for meaning, for truth? This is something deep in the core of the values of all of these institutions. Nobody gets into being a librarian because they want to make a lot of money. We do this work because we really think that there is meaning in these shared histories. We think that these connections between people make us a better people altogether. And so the work that we do across all of these disciplines is there because this is a value that we share. How does the practice, how do the standards, how do the technologies that we do enhance this work? Because this is why we do the work that we do. And so with that, I want to thank all of you, my colleagues. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for the work that you do. And I want to thank you for listening. I would love for us to go through this conference and think about how do these values play into all the conversations that we have going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That was really, really beautiful. I've never seen a keynote that uses the key themes of the conference so beautifully to illustrate what we want to talk about. I don't know whether we have still some time for some questions. Are there some people who want to remark or add something or question something? Then I have a question, if I take the liberty. You once said, in more or less in the middle of the presentation, it's not so much about care, but what I felt throughout your presentation was actually a very much an awareness of the fact that maybe siloed care is something of the past, but you were advocating for a kind of caring approach across all collections.
Yes.
Was that my right perception?
I think so, and I think there's a value that we have in care for the collections, but we don't care for the collections to take care of pieces of paper. We take care of the collection, I think, because we think those collections will have value to the people of today or the people of tomorrow. And for me, that is that connection that we're trying to do, to say this is work that we can't forget the people, either on the side in this room who do the work, or the people for whom we are doing the work. And I think we occasionally fall into that hole where it's about doing the work.
Yeah.
And
I think the procedures and standards and technology are so alluring
indeed
sometimes that we forget about that.
Yes.
So thank you for highlighting. Erwin. Oh, I don't know where there's a mic. If you...
No, it is coming.
The mic is coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your opening. You talked about how recent the digital history has been, and it has been recent, but also I think as a field we've been talking for a good 20 years about responding to the possibilities that Google offers users and change user expectations. Could you maybe reflect a little bit on what are some of the positive progressions you like, what are the things that we've been good at in taking that response?
And could you briefly, if you have a question, say who you are?
Yes, my name is Erwin Verbrugge and I'm at Q42.
Yes. I think we have embraced that idea of openness in a very large way. That idea of this being work that we do for a global audience is something that comes out of the work that we do together. I think we have done an amazing job of understanding what it means to manage that, the idea that information is not only for specialized audiences. I see regularly in the conversations we have this conversation about access as a key value across all of the fields. And that is maybe not always the tradition of all of these disciplines, some more than others. But increasingly I see that. And I see this desire for the work of the standards, the work of the process to build bridges across knowledge and to say that the work of its single institution is valuable, but it's more valuable in conversation across all of the institutions. And so these are the things that I see our field doing in reaction to the world and that I see incredibly valuable as we continue to move forward. I would also say that the level of professionalism, the level of quality that we produce has and remains incredibly high. The work of museum photographers is some of the best in the world. The work of documentation that we do is a model for how the internet was built. We serve as that sort of intellectual framework of organization of information, and the work of the internet would not be possible without the foundation of libraries and archives and museums in many ways. And so I see, we are the foundation. The world of technology has more resources, more money. It has a profit motive. It moves at a pace that we can't keep up with. But it rests on a foundation of the kind of work that we do.
Chris.
Thank you for the presentation, David. I'm Chris Dijks from the Rijksmuseum. One of the things I was wondering, I think you highlighted a disconnect between the systems that we're using to store the information in and the sort of information that people are expecting to encounter online.
Right.
Is there any progress that you see we can make there to alleviate that disconnect? And this is something that we're struggling with. Do we need different systems? Do we need different standards? Do we already have the standards that help us tell those stories? Because I think if you go on Thursday to that event where curators will tell a story about an object, that story will be completely different than the information that we store in our collection management system.
Right.
And that's something that I always struggle with. How can we help that point forward?
I think the major change that I see in the way that we do this is most of the standards that we have. The experience of walking through a museum is a browsing experience, and we arrange the objects to help as you move through the physical space to encounter things that connect together. And the work of the library catalog is also a browsing interface. The work of an archive is all about the records in their contexts. And so for many, many years, we've had this idea that the primary discovery would be a browsing interface, which was based on that idea that we were building systems that could operate on a human scale, because you could flip through the finding aid and find the thing you want. It was a technology geared to the scale and the abilities of a human with a piece of paper. I think as we have done this amazing work of digitization, of cataloging, we have built information ecosystems that are larger than the scale of humans. We can't browse anymore, And so I think what we're seeing is that paradigm shift from browse to search. And so I think the work that we're doing here is really what changes when that like high recall, low precision model of search changes away from the high precision model of browse, and what data do we have to capture differently? And so I see that as the change that we're all struggling with across it.
And of course, now we're moving from search to AI, which is a whole different thing, which we'll talk about later. But I was curious, thank you for the keynote, it was really great. I'm curious because in thinking about the disciplinarity and how working together also works with that curiosity of what is working for the other ones. When I talk to our archivists, they have very deep knowledge in some places that that really help us. And so I wonder if you also are in collaborating, noticing how can we evolve our models, like our standards in each way, and learn from each other. And if you've seen that happening a lot, because I know that just in the little work we do, learning, as long as we go in with curiosity, actually, it seems like we could really learn from each discipline and actually shift even our own. So I wonder if you can speak to that.
I think there's huge connections across those disciplines. I don't think of them necessarily as radically different disciplines. I think in our own little universe, they feel that way sometimes. But we're really all interested in care and access to objects that are important in telling stories. And I think the more we can bridge across those areas, the more robust we can be, because, museums don't give out museum objects, and so they have none of the experience of that like duty to individual care and serving research. They can learn incredible things from librarians. I've most of my time in museums, so I'll use them as the example of people learning because I know it better. But archives are really good at situating objects in historical context and telling the story of how it was captured, how it was collected, where it used to be and where it is now. Museums are now much more interested in provenance, and I think a lot of that is learning from the way that archivists display that information. And those bridges, I think, really help tell new versions of the story and build those connections between. And I also think the artworks are documented in the archives, and the books are about the objects, and these things connect together in beautiful ways that help people tell stories that haven't been told before.
Thank you. I think there's time for one last question, and that's over there. Sorry, Jeroen.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Annelies. I work for a couple of museums in Belgium. Very interesting. Actually, I hope we share the same thought that we need to bind these disciplinaries. The thing is, when I'm trying to convince my museum directors, the policymakers, I've been trying this for several years, like we have to cross-disciplinary and so on. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
I think we're all used to thinking in this sort of hierarchical way with boundaries, disciplinaries, silos within the museums, and I bounce into this wall into which we are mentally, I think, not ready to make the connection between all these silos, and it's really difficult to make it in a sort of digital strategy.
Yeah.
Any tips would be welcome. No pressure.
I will say I have not solved this problem. But I will say the things that I have found most useful are to start simple, that just providing a link from one discipline to the other opens much more doors than trying to combine models of the world together. You can get a lot of value by showing the connections. And I also find the value, and much of this comes from the bottom up. And so it really is, it's not going, I don't know that this is going to come from the museum director or the head of the library coming down and saying, We'll give up our organizational area. I think it comes from the archivist and the librarian and the cataloger having lunch together and finding those shared connections, because they're the people who put the data in, they're the people who could make those connections. And when the value is seen, then I think it can start going up into strategy. And so I think that's the way, again, it's the people that are going to make this, not the standards or the practice.
And that's a beautiful bridge to saying that we have coffee and a coffee break. So we'll see you here. So thank you, David,
Thank you.
for a wonderful presentation.